Phaedo by Plato, Part 4 of 5, translated by Sanderson Beck. "But let us go on," he said. "First remind me what you said, if I appear not to remember. For Simmias, I think, both disbelieves and fears that the soul, though both more divine and beautiful than the body, may perish, first being in the form of a harmony. And Cebes, it seemed to me, agreed with me on this, that the soul is longer lasting than the body, but it was unclear to all whether after wearing out many bodies repeatedly, the soul at the end, leaving behind the body, did itself now perish, and that this was death, the destruction of the soul, since the body does not ever stop perishing. But then is this, Simmias and Cebes, what it is necessary for us to consider?" They both agreed it was this. "Then," he said, "do you not accept all of the previous arguments, or just some of them?" "Some," they said, "but not others." "What then," he asked, "do you say about the argument in which we said learning is remembering, and from this our soul necessarily has to exist somewhere else, before it was entangled in the body?" "I," said Cebes, "was at that time most marvelously convinced by it, and now I remain so more than by any argument." "I too," said Simmias, "hold it thus, and would be very surprised if this should ever seem otherwise to me." And Socrates said, "But it is necessary for you, Theban guests, to think otherwise if you keep the opinion the harmony is a compound of things, and the soul is a harmony composed out of what is strung in the body. For how will you not accept your own statement that a composite harmony existed before those things out of which it is necessary for it to be composed? Or will you accept it?" "Not at all, Socrates," he said. "Then do you observe," he said, "that this agrees with what you argue when you say the soul exists before it enters into the human form and body, and it is composed out of what does not yet exist? For surely a harmony is not such as what you compare it to. But first both the lyre and the strings and the sounds come into being still untuned, and last of all is the harmony composed, and it is the first to perish. So how does this argument agree with yours?" "Not at all," said Simmias. "And yet," he said, "surely it is fitting for there to be accord between the other argument and what concerns harmony." "Yes, it is fitting," said Simmias. "Now this," he said, "is not in accord with yours. But look, which of the arguments do you prefer? That learning is remembering, or that the soul is a harmony?" "Much more the former, Socrates," he said. "For the latter came to me without demonstration, with some probability and plausibility, which also is why it seems so to many people. But I am aware that arguments making demonstrations based on probability may be false, and if one does not guard against them, one may well be deceived, both in geometry and in everything else. But the argument about remembering and learning was found to be demonstrated by worthy propositions, for it was said how our soul exists before it entered into the body, just as this which is named as having the reality which is. And I myself am convinced of this, and I have accepted it sufficiently and correctly. So it is necessary for me, as it seems, because of these things, to accept the arguing neither from myself nor another that the soul is a harmony." "But what of this way, Simmias?" he asked. "Does it seem to you a harmony or any other compound can be in any other state than that out of which the elements were composed?" "Not at all." "Nor can anything do, as I know, or experience anything else but what they do or experience?" He agreed. "Then a harmony cannot lead these out of which it is composed, but follows." He assented. "Then a harmony is quite unable to be moved or sounded or be opposed by anything else opposite to its parts." "Of course," he said. "But what? Is it not thus that each harmony brings forth harmony as it is harmonized?" "I do not understand," he said. Would it not, he said, if it was harmonized better and more, if this is to be accepted, be better harmonized and more, but if worse and lesser, then worse and less? Certainly. Is this so concerning the soul, as even to the smallest degree is one soul more and better, or lesser and worse, a soul itself, than another? Not in the least, he said. Bear along now, he said, toward God. Is a soul said to have intelligence and virtue and to be good, but another stupidity and vice and to be bad? And are these things said true? Yes, true. Then of those maintaining the soul is a harmony, what will one say these things in the soul are, the virtue and evil? That there is some other harmony and discord, and to be harmonized, the good also has in its harmony reality another harmony, but the discordant is itself and has no other in it? I have nothing to say, said Simmias, but it is clear that the one assuming that would say some such thing. But we agreed before, he said, that one is no better nor worse a soul than another, and this is the equivalent to one harmony is neither better nor more nor worse nor less than another, is it not? Certainly. And that which is neither better nor worse of a harmony is neither better nor worse harmonized, is it so? It is. And is that which is neither better nor worse fitting any more or less a share of harmony, or is it equal? It is equal. Then a soul, since it is neither better nor worse than another soul, is itself. Is it neither better nor worse harmonized? Just so. And this would have no more a share of discord or harmony. It would not. And this again would have no more a share of evil or virtue than another, if evil was discord and virtue harmony. No more. But rather, Simmias, according to correct logic, no soul would have a share of evil, if it is a harmony. For perhaps a harmony being completely a harmony itself, it would have no share of discord. Of course not. And perhaps the soul, being completely a soul, no evil. For how could it out of what we said before? Out of this argument, then, all souls of all life will be similarly good. If it is by nature, they are similarly souls. It seems so to me, Socrates, he said. And does it seem beautiful, he said, that the argument would mean this and result in these things, if the hypothesis were correct, that the soul is a harmony? Not in the least, he said. But what, he asked, of all that is in a person, do you say anything rules except the soul, and in the wise? I do not. Which yields according to the feelings of the body, and which opposes? But I mean, when it is hot and thirsty, does it draw it in opposition to not drink? And when it is hungry, to not eat? And do we see how in 1,000 other things, according to the body, the soul opposes, or not? Certainly. Then did we not agree previously that it could never, if it be a harmony, sound opposite to the tensions and relaxations and vibrations and whatever other conditions those might experience out of which it happens to be made, but it would follow them and never lead? We agreed, he said, for how can it not? Then what? Does it not now appear to us to be working exactly the opposite, leading all of those out of which one says it consists, and opposing them in almost everything through all of life, and mastering in every way, punishing them more harshly and with pain, according to gymnastics and medicine, and milder things, both threatening and admonishing them, speaking to the desires and lusts and fears, as though it were something else other than those things? And just as Homer composed in the Odyssey, where he says of Odysseus, beating his breast, he reproached his heart, saying, endure it, heart, even more horrible have you endured. Do you think, when these thoughts were composed, he thought of this reality as a harmony, also to be led by the conditions of the body, but not something to lead and master these things? And being itself much more a divine thing than a harmony? By Zeus, Socrates, it seems so to me. Then, best one, it would not be beautiful at all for us to say that the soul is a harmony. For as it is likely, we would not be agreeing with the divine poet Homer, nor with ourselves. That is so, he said. Well then, said Socrates, the Theban harmony probably has been moderately gracious to us. But what of Cadmus, he said. Cebes, how shall we find grace, and with what argument? It seems to me, said Cebes, you will find it out. At least this argument against harmony spoke to me wonderfully beyond expectation. For when Simmias was describing the difficulty, I certainly wondered if anyone could do anything with this argument. So it seemed to me very unusual that it did not accept the first direct approach of your argument. Now I would not be surprised if the argument of Cadmus experienced the same thing. Oh, happy one, said Socrates, do not talk big, lest some envy overturn our argument which is about to be made. But surely this is in the care of God, and let us, being near like Homer, examine if there is anything in what you say. Surely the crown of what you seek is to prove in a way worthy of us that the soul is indestructible and immortal. If the philosophical man about to die is confident and believes, dying, he will do well there, differently than if in living another life he died. He is confident that courage is not stupid and foolish, in dying, that the soul is something strong and divine and existed even before we were born as people. You say all this does not prevent it from not revealing immortality, but that the soul is long-lasting and existed somewhere an extraordinarily long time before, and knew and did many things. Yet it was not any more immortal, but its very coming into the body was the beginning of its destruction, like a disease. And then it lives the distress of this life and finally perishes in what is called death. But now you say it does not matter whether it enters into a body once or many times, in reference to what each of us fears, for it is fitting to be afraid, unless one is a fool, if one does not know, nor have an argument to give, how it is immortal. Some such thing is, I think, Cebes, what you mean, and I repeat it on purpose often, so that nothing may escape us. And if you wish, you may add or subtract anything. And Cebes said, but in the present, I have nothing either to subtract or add, and this is what I mean. Then Socrates, pausing for a long time and considering something in himself, said, it is not a trivial thing, Cebes, you are seeking, for it is necessary to investigate completely the cause of generation and decay. So I will tell you my own experience concerning these things if you wish, since if something appears to you useful in what I say, you may use it for persuasion when you argue. I certainly do wish it, said Cebes. Then hear what I will say. For I, Cebes, he said, when young, was tremendously eager for this wisdom, which they call the study of nature. For it seemed to me to be magnificent, to know the causes of each thing, why each thing comes into being, and why it perishes, and why it exists. And I often changed myself topsy-turvy, considering first such things. Do heat and cold take some putrefaction, as some argued, and then living things grow together? And is it the blood by which we think, or the air, or fire, or none of these? And is the brain what provides the sensations of hearing, and seeing, and smelling? And out of these does memory and opinion come, and out of memory and opinion received does knowledge according to these become stable. And considering the ruin of these things and the state of heaven and earth, until finally it seemed to be unnatural for me to consider this matter at all. And I will give you sufficient proof for what I knew distinctly before, as it seemed to myself and to others. Then by that consideration thus quite blinded, so that I unlearned even what before I was thinking to know, about many other things, and by what a person grows. For this I was thinking before was clear to everyone, that it is by eating and drinking. For when out of food flesh accrues to flesh, and bones to bones. And thus, according to the same argument also, parts of the same grow to each of the others. And then the little bulk becomes more later. and thus the small person becomes big. Then I was thinking thus. Does it not seem reasonable to you? Yes, said Cebes. Then consider this also, for I was thinking it seemed to me adequate. Whenever some person stood alongside, the big one would appear to be larger than the small one by a head, and a horse with a horse. And still more palpably than this, 10 seemed to me to be more than 8 because 2 was added to it, and the 2 cubit to be larger than the cubit because of being twice as long. And now, said Cebes, what do you think about this? By Zeus, he said, my place is far from thinking I know the cause of any of these things, who does not accept myself at all that, when 1 is added to 1, whether the 1 to which was added became 2, or the 1 added, or whether the 1 added and the 1 to which was added, because of the addition 1 to the other, became 2. For I wonder if, when each of them was without the other, each was then 1, and they were not then 2. And when they were brought near to each other, then this was the cause of their becoming 2, the putting of them closer together with each other. And still I am not persuaded that, if 1 is divided, the division causes it to become 2. For then they rose because 1 was near to each other and added to another, and now because 1 is subtracted and separated from another. Because of this, I no longer believe I know even the meaning of how 1 or anything else is generated, or perishes, or exists, according to this type of method. But I made at random another way myself, and I do not accept this any more. But when I heard someone reading out of a book, as he said, of Anaxagoras, and arguing that it is the mind which sets in order and causes everything, I was pleased by this cause, and it seemed to me good to have some way for the mind to be the cause of everything. And I thought, if this is so, the mind in ordering orders everything and puts each thing itself how it is best to have it. So if anyone wishes to discover the cause of each, how it is generated or perishes or exists, one must discover about it how it is best for it either to be or to experience anything whatsoever or to do. And then, out of this argument, nothing else is fitting for a person to consider concerning both it and others, but the virtue and the best. And it is necessary to know this and the worst, for the knowledge about them is the same. Contemplating these things, I was glad to think I had discovered a teacher of the causes of reality, according to my mind in Anaxagoras, and to me would be shown first whether the earth is flat or round, and when shown, he would explain the cause and necessity, arguing the better and why it was better for her to be such. And if he said she was in the center, he would explain how it was better for her to be in the center. And if these things would be proved, I was prepared to yearn no longer for any other kind of cause. And I was prepared also thus about the sun, learning in like manner about both the moon and the other stars, the speed toward each other and courses and the other phenomena, how it is better for each of them both to do and undergo what is undergone. For I never thought that, having said they were ordered by mind, any other cause would be offered for them, than that it is best to have them so as they are. So having given a cause to each, and to all in common, I was thinking it was being explained what was best for each and good for all in common. And I would not give up these hopes for a great deal, but taking the books very seriously, I read them as quickly as I could in order to know as quickly as possible the best and the worst. So, from this wonderful hope, friend, I was swept away. When advancing and reading, I saw the man made no use of the mind, nor did he charge any causes in the ordering of things, but air and ether and water and many other oddities were charged. And it seemed to me it was most like experiencing as if someone said that Socrates does everything he does by mind, and when attempting to explain the causes of each thing I do, should say first that because of these things I am now sitting here, my body being composed out of bones and muscles, and the bones are hard and have joints separating them from each other, and the muscles can be contracted and relaxed, surrounding the bones with the flesh and skin which contains them. So raising the bones in their sockets, loosening and tightening the muscles, makes possible the bending which is now my care. And because of this cause, I am sitting here in a bent position. And concerning the discussion with you, he would argue other causes, such as voice and air and hearing and many other such causes, neglecting to say the true causes that, since it seemed to the Athenians it was best to condemn me, and so because of these things it seemed to me best to sit here, and more right staying to undergo whatever judgment they order, since by the dog, I fancy long ago these muscles and bones would have been either around Megara or Boeotia, carried by an opinion of the best, if I did not think it was more just and beautiful, before fleeing and escaping, to undergo the judgment which the city may impose. But to call such things causes is very odd, and if anyone should say that without having such things as bones and muscles and other things I have, I could not have done what seemed to me best, one would be saying the truth. Yet to say, because of these things I do what I do, and I do these by mind, but not from choosing what is best, would be a far-fetched and rash way of speaking. For the discussion is unable to distinguish that the cause is in reality something else, and the other is that without which the cause could never be a cause. So it appears to me many are groping as in the dark, attaching a false name to a stranger when they address a cause this way. And so someone, by putting a whirlwind around the earth, makes the earth remain below heaven, and another as a flat trough, supported on a foundation of air. But of the power which is able now to establish these, placing them as is best, they neither seek this, nor do they think it has any divine force. For they believe they can discover an Atlas stronger and more immortal and all-embracing than this, and in truth they do not think at all of the good, which must both unite and embrace. Therefore, of such causes I would like to become a student, wherever and whenever, from anyone. But since I was deprived of this, and did not find it, nor was I able to learn it from another, about the second voyage seeking for the cause which I conducted, do you wish me, he asked, to add what I did, Cebes? I do wish it enormously, he said. It seemed to me then, he said, after this, since I had failed in considering the realities, it was necessary to be careful that I should not suffer as those who watch and look at the sun during an eclipse, for some ruin their eyes, unless they look at it in water or something like that. And I understood this, and was afraid lest the soul would be completely blinded, looking at the things with the eyes, and attempting to perceive them with each of the senses. So it seemed to me necessary to take refuge in the meanings, to consider in them the truth of the realities. Perhaps, then, the way I represent some is not accurate, for I do not at all concede that considering the realities in their meanings is to consider them in images any more than in actions. But then in this way I began, and hypothesizing each argument which I judged to be most sound, whatever seems to me to agree with this, I assume as being true, both concerning causes and any other thing whatever, and what does not, as not true. But I wish to tell you more clearly what I mean, for I think now you do not understand. No, by God, said Cebes, certainly not. Well, he said, I mean this, nothing new, but as always and elsewhere and in the past argument, I have not stopped saying it. For I am going to try to explain to you the form of the cause which I have been working on, and I am back again on those much repeated things and begin from those, hypothesizing there is a certain beauty in and of itself, and goodness, and greatness, and all the rest, which if you grant me and agree these exist, I hope out of this to explain to you the cause and discover how the soul is immortal. Truly, said Cebes, as it is granted to you, quickly conclude. Consider then next, he said, these things if they seem to you as they do to me. For it appears to me, if anything else is beautiful except beauty itself, for no other reason is it beautiful than for the reason that it shares in that beauty. And so I say this of all things. Do you consent to such a cause? I consent, he said. Now then, he said, I do not yet understand, nor am I able to know these other wise causes. But if anyone tells me the reason why anything whatever is beautiful is either its flowery color or shape, or anything else of that kind whatever, I let the other things go, for I am confused by all the others. And this I hold simply and absolutely, and perhaps simplistically by myself, that nothing else makes it beautiful except either the presence or communion of that beauty in whatever way that may also come to it. For this is still not confirmed, but that all beautiful things become beautiful by beauty. For this seems to me to be the most sure thing to answer, both to myself and another. And holding to this, I believe it will never fall. But it is safe both for me and anyone else to answer that beautiful things are beautiful by beauty, or does it not seem so to you too? It does. And great things are great, and the great greater by greatness, and the lesser are less by smallness. Yes. And you would not accept it if someone said one is greater than another by a head, and the smaller smaller in the same way. But you would affirm that you say nothing else but that every greater thing is greater than another by nothing else than greatness. And on account of this greater, because of greatness, and the smaller is smaller by nothing else than by smallness. And on account of this smaller, because of smallness. Fearing, I think, lest some opposite argument met you if you said someone is greater by a head and smaller. First, that the greater is greater by the same thing, and the smaller smaller. Since the greater is greater by a head which is small, and this is monstrous, that something is great by something small. Or would you not be afraid of this? And laughing, Cebes said, I would. Then he said, would you be afraid to say 10 is 2 more than 8, and surpasses it on account of this cause? But rather it counts more also on account of counting. And the 2 cubit is greater than the 1 cubit by half, but not by greatness. For the same fear is there. Certainly, he said. But what? Would you not avoid saying that in adding 1 to 1, addition is the cause of the 2, or division of the dividing? And you would shout loudly that you know of no other way each thing is generated than by sharing in the essential idea of each thing in which it shares. And in these you do not have any other cause of the generating of the 2 than sharing in duality. And it is necessary for things intending to be 2 to share in this, and whatever intends to be 1 in unity. And you would let go of these divisions and additions and other such subtleties, passing yourself for the wiser to answer, and you would be afraid, as in the saying, of your own shadow and ignorance. Having that sure hypothesis, would you answer thus? And if anyone should challenge this hypothesis, you would let it go and not answer, until you should consider the things that come from that, whether to you they agree with each other or disagree. And when you have to give the meaning of that principle, you would give it in the same way, by hypothesizing another hypothesis, which should appear best of the higher ones, until you should come to what was sufficient. And at the same time you would not mix, as the contentious do, in discussing about the beginning and what comes out of that, if you wish to find any of the realities. For perhaps none of those think at all about this argument, for adequate by their common wisdom in mixing everything up, nevertheless they can be satisfied with this themselves. But if you are a philosopher, I think you should do as I say. You tell the truth, said Simmias and Cebes together. By Zeus, Phaedo, reasonably said. For amazingly, it seems to me how distinctly, even to one having small intelligence, he said these things. Certainly, it's Socrates, and it seems so to everyone present. Also for us not present, but hearing now, But what was the discussion after this? As I believe, when these things were consented to by him, and they had agreed each of these forms exists, and other things sharing in these have their names, then after this he asked, So, if you say these things thus, do you not, when you say Simmias is greater than Socrates, but smaller than Phaedo, say then there is in Simmias both greatness and smallness? I do. But, he said, you agree that Simmias exceeding Socrates is not, as stated in that phrase, also true. For not by having been born does Simmias exceed Socrates in this, but by the greatness which he happens to have. Nor does he exceed Socrates because Socrates is Socrates, but because Socrates has smallness next to that one's greatness. True. And he is not exceeded by Phaedo because Phaedo is Phaedo, but because Phaedo has greatness next to the smallness of Simmias. This is so. Thus Simmias has the name small and large, being in between the two. By exceeding in greatness, he is exceeding the smallness, but submitting to the greatness, exceeding his smallness. And at once smiling, he said, I am speaking like a book, but then, anyway, it is as I say. He agreed. And I am talking this way on account of wishing for it to seem to you as it does to me. For it appears to me not only that greatness itself will never be at the same time great and small, but also that the greatness in us will never accept the small, nor will it be exceeded by it. But one of two things, either it flees and withdraws when its opposite, the small, comes toward it, or by that one coming near, it perishes. But it will not in surviving and accepting smallness be other than as it was. Just as I accepted and survived smallness, and still being as I am this same small person. And the greatness has not endured being small, as also the same way the smallness in us will never be great, nor will any other opposite, which is still as it was, become and be at the same time opposite, but it either goes away or perishes in this experience. Absolutely, said Cebes. Thus it appears to me. And one of those present hearing said, who it was I don't clearly remember, before the gods, is not what we agreed to in the previous argument the very opposite of what is being said now? Out of the lesser the greater is generated, and out of the greater the lesser, and simply the very generation of opposites is out of their opposites? But now it seems to me it is being said that this could never occur. And Socrates, turning his head and listening, said, Like a man you have spoken, yet you do not understand the difference between the meaning of now and then. For then it was said, out of the opposite thing is generated. But now that the opposite itself could never become its own opposite, neither in us nor in nature. For then, friend, we were talking about things having opposites, naming those by those names, but now about those themselves, which, having, have the name named. And those themselves, we say, will never accept generation from each other. And looking at Cebes at the same time, he said, Cebes, are you at all bothered by any of the things which he said? Not so much, said Cebes, though I am not saying that many things don't bother me. Then we are agreed, he said, plainly on this. An opposite is never to be an opposite to itself. Completely, he said. So still also consider, he said, if you agree with me on this. Do you call anything heat and cold? I do. Then is it the same as snow and fire? By God, no. But something other than fire is heat, and something other than snow is cold. Yes. But here I think it seems to you if snow ever accepted heat, as in the previous argument, it will no longer be as it was, snow and warm. But encountering heat will either withdraw itself or perish. Certainly. And fire, encountering cold, either withdraws itself or perishes. Yet it can never endure accepting the cold, and still be as it was, fire and cold. You say the truth, he said. Then it is, he said, concerning some of these, that not only the form itself is worthy of its name into the eternity of time, but also something else, which is not that, but has the shape of that always whenever it exists. But still, in the following, perhaps it will be clearer what I am saying. For the odd is always necessary for this name to occur, as now we are saying, or is it not? Certainly. Then is it the only one, for I am asking this, or is there something else also, which is not the same as the odd? But similarly, it is necessary to call this also with its own name always because of its nature, so that it never is separated from the odd. And I mean the same is also possible in the case of three and many others. But consider the three. Then does it not seem to you it may always be addressed by its own name and as odd, which is not the same as three? But similarly, thus in the case of both the 3 and the 5 and half of all the numbers, so that not being the same as the odd, each of them is always odd. And in the same way, the 2 and the 4 and all in the other series of numbers, not being the same as the even, similarly, each of these is always even. Do you agree or not? Of course, he said. Now, he said, observe what I wish to clarify. And here it is that it appears not only are those opposites not accepting each other, but also opposites which, not being opposites to each other, always have opposites. These, similarly, do not accept that form, which is opposite to the reality in them, but in its approach they perish or withdraw. Are we not saying the 3 will perish or anything else before it will submit to becoming even, while it is still remaining 3? Certainly, said Sebes. But, he said, 2 is not opposite to 3. No. Then not only opposite forms approaching each other do not remain, but also certain other opposites approaching do not remain. You say the truth, he said. Then do you wish, he said, if we can, to determine what these are? Certainly. Then Sebes, he said, will they be those which, when they take possession, not only compel it to take its own form, but also always of some opposite? What do you mean? The same as we just said. For you know, of course, that those forms which take possession of the 3 must be in themselves not only 3, but also odd. Certainly. So still such, we said, the opposite forms to that shape which make it this never could be. No. And does the odd make it? Yes. And is the even opposite to this? Yes. Then the 3 will never come to the form of the even. Of course not. So the 3 has no part in the even. No part. Then the 3 is uneven. Yes. Now what I said is to be determined is what things, not being opposites to something, nevertheless do not accept the opposite itself. As now the 3, in not being the opposite to the even, does not any the more accept it, for it always brings forth the opposite to it, and the 2 to the odd, and fire to the cold, and all the rest. But see if you note this, not only the opposite does not accept the opposite, but also that which brings forth something opposite to that which it approaches, will never accept the oppositeness of the very thing brought. And again recall, for there is no harm in hearing it often. The 5 will not accept the even, nor the 10, the double, the odd. So this itself is also not opposite to the other, but nevertheless it will not accept that of the odd, nor the half, nor such others that of the whole. Also in turn, a third, and all such things, if you follow and agree on this. Very certainly I both agree, he said, and follow.